Release the Hounds.
Some men just want to watch the world burn.
You are listening to The Hounds of Diana, and I am your host, Harrison Katz. Welcome, everyone. This evening, it is November 7th, 2022. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been several weeks since I did a live show. Took a little bit of a break. Didn't go anywhere, no vacation, still working, but just took a break from the information. Took a break from researching. Couldn't quite stop reading. Couldn't break that habit. I'm just a bookworm. But had no shows to prepare for, and just took that time to reflect. And it was quite nice. So it's good to be back. And this evening, as usual, I will start with a scripture verse. This evening I will be reading from the book of Proverbs, chapter 16, verse 16. How much better is it to get wisdom than gold, and to get understanding rather to be chosen than silver. Now, of course, in the context is speaking of wisdom and understanding specifically as found in the scriptures, in the Word of God. But this text, this message, this truth, this instruction that we are given, I myself personally, because I can only speak about myself and my own experiences, and maybe I don't do that enough, because I'm so focused, again, when I come on these shows, it's all about the information. It's never about me. I try not to make it about myself. And ever since my youth, really, I've been looking for truth. I've been looking for understanding. I've never taken a man or a woman's word at face value when it was something that I could easily look and inspect and navigate and come to my own conclusion without anyone's pre-drawn supposition or anything they may just be parroting because they heard another man or a woman say it. And unfortunately, that is the way information is passed along. A lot of information is not good information, but nonetheless, it is the topic of tonight's show in a general fashion. Tonight, I will be discussing what I like to refer to as the Jesuit information gap. And towards the end of the broadcast, I will be sharing with you some of my predictions for the future. Now, returning back to this verse from Proverbs 16:16, we're instructed not to chase after money, not to chase after real money, gold and silver, or any in other places in Proverbs it tells us, to seek wisdom and understanding of the Lord more than any precious ruby or stone. So it's not about commerce, it's about truth. And a very broad term that we use to describe both what is truth and what is false falls under the same category as information. It's all information. What I deal with on a weekly basis is information. I do not consider myself a broker of information because, again, broker implies some form of commerce and sale. I believe that this information needs to be brought to the light, and the only way to do that is to give it to men freely. Though it is true, most people don't appreciate anything unless they have to pay for it. unless they actually have some skin in the game, per se. But nonetheless, much of the information that I bring to you, you will not hear anywhere else. But again, I am not anyone special. I'm just the vessel. Excuse me, I'm just the vessel. I remember when I was young, had to be 5th grade in elementary school, so we're talking 10, 11 years old. Down in Clearwater, Florida, Pinellas County, they used to bring all the kids in Pinellas County that were in 5th grade to a little, it's like everybody took a field trip from all the different schools, and they went to this specific place for kids called Enterprise Village. And the whole idea is at one day your school and maybe some 5th graders from another school and maybe a couple others would all take a field trip to Enterprise Village, and they would give us a walkthrough on how to be an adult. They'd give us a little phony bank account with a checkbook, teach us how to write a check. Each of us had a little job. Maybe you sold tapes or you sold pretzels or whatever it was. They had this whole little mock-up town where everybody had a job and everybody had their lunch hour and so forth and so on to train us all to be good little consumers when we graduate public school. Well, it just so happened that there was one job that every child wanted. And I happened to get that job. And that was the job of being the radio host DJ for the entire afternoon that we were on the field trip. And I remember at the time I was pretty good at it. I was it's funny to think back on all the different ways that the Lord can prepare you without you even knowing it. You know, because in many ways I'd never wanted to be the man with the information. I was perfectly content being not the upfront person, but being the guy in the background. The guy who supplies the guy up front with the good information. And then, of course, never getting any credit for it. But again, I never got into this for any kind of credit. It's all about information. And what did I see? I saw that even in these fields, these subject matters that myself and everybody else here at 24/7 World Radio, that these subject matters that we discuss, and that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of books written on, specifically pertaining to the Vatican, the Roman Catholic Church, and the power of the Jesuits. But even within this small little, I hate to use this word, but online community of people, there was still a very large information gap. And so my thought was to, through my research, specifically from the man who I learned the most from and who taught me the most, Pastor Eric John Phelps, I came in this to help fill in those gaps as a supplement. To say he's laid out so much of an outline, but he's only one man, and one man can only do so much. So I had to step out from the background and just be the man who was just sending the information to actually be the man to bring it to you. And I have to say, this last year has been quite the experience. I have had to push myself every week, or at least on average every week. There's been a couple times that I've been absent. But for the most part, in the last year, I've produced about 47 hours worth of research. Every hour being unique. Every hour being something, having information that you have probably never heard before, but all being pertinent and all being put together in a way. And that's not for me to brag, but this is just, I find this, my intent, my motivation for doing this has now become more personal, to where every week that I have the opportunity to come here and speak to, I mean, even if it's only several hundred people who are listening, this serves for me as a form of expression, and also a not just mental, just being able to talk about this subject or these subjects or all these things that I research, but also a way for me to express my creativity. So when we're dealing with information, I've said this before and I'll continue to say it. It's almost impossible for you to know what you don't know. And it's almost even more impossible for you to think that you know a subject in and out, that you have a really good handle on the particular information, and then for someone to come along and say, no, 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 that is all wrong. It's even harder to reconform your your conclusions, your thoughts, and to integrate this new information into the fold. And that has been one of my personal um, hardest obstacles to overcome in a lot of this, is just putting this information together, because it's out there. It's all out there. Anything you've ever seen or heard from me has all been directly out of the public domain. I don't have any top secret clearances. I don't have access to classified information. This is all off in the public realm. But you see, this is, dear listeners, the age of information. So when you're looking for specific information, let's say you go to the internet, to the World Wide Web, you are looking for needles in a mountain-sized stack of other needles. You understand? You have to have some guiding behind, some method to your madness when you're searching for this information. And me, I'm no genius. I'm no tech wizard, okay? I just simply understand how to work the algorithms. That's it. You want to know what the secret to my finding this information is? I understand a little bit more than the average person how these algorithms and these search engines work. And I also understand that when you're dealing with information, specifically digital information, not everything is on the internet. If any single what's the word, byte of information is online on the internet, it is there because someone put it there. It had to be input digitally into that digital space. So there is truth, there is information that cannot be found on the internet. And that is where researchers like myself and others come in, who are looking and digging into old books and looking for connections that maybe no one has made before, trying to fill in those information gaps. Because, man, when I'm telling you, it's not just one single gap, it is multiple. And if you want an in-depth look at what I'm talking about, in a more specified way, just go to my YouTube channel, Harry Katz, and just watch from the Hounds of Diana, episode number 1, all the way down through, I believe, 46 was the last one, up until tonight's show. And you will see. Information is just information until it is collected, analyzed, and then disseminated. That is when the information becomes, quote, intelligence. So, unfortunately, got a lot of good people out here doing a lot of good information gathering. I mean, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately. Fortunately, there's a lot of people out here doing a lot of good information gathering. But there are even with people online who are in the ballpark per se of the truth. There still exist these huge information gaps to where they cannot understand fully what is happening or come to a truth-filled conclusion rather than just being presented with all this information and then afterwards given a pre-drawn conclusion. And because, hey, that guy's the expert, we'll just listen to what he has to say instead of doing the work myself. Join me on the other side after this break and we'll get into some examples of these Jesuit information gaps here on the Hounds of Diana.
You're listening to your source for the truth. This is 24/7 World Radio.
This is Brother Nicholas. Join me every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the German Bible Truth Hour and at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Dutch Bible Truth Hour on 24/7 World Radio. This is Bruder Nicholas. Ich lade euch herzlich ein, mich anzuhören, jeder Dienstag um 2 Uhr nachmittags, amerikanische Zeit, für die deutsche Bibelwahrheitsstunde und 3 Uhr amerikanische Standardzeit für die niederländische Bibelwahrheitsstunde am World Radio 24/7. Dit is broeder Nico. U bent hartelijk uitgenodigd om elke dinsdag om 2 uur Amerikaanse standaardtijd het Duitse Bijbelwaarheidsuur te volgen en 3 uur Amerikaanse standaardtijd het Nederlandse Bijbelwaarheidsuur te volgen op 24/7 World Radio.
This is Eric John Phelps. Please listen to my broadcast, The Eric John Phelps Show, as I preach the true gospel of the risen Lord Jesus Christ, defend the Protestant Reformation that birthed Western civilization, and expose the counter-Reformation of the Jesuit order seeking to make the Pope of Rome the universal monarch of the world. Join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on 247worldradio.com.
This is 24/7 World Radio, your source for the truth.
Welcome back to the Hounds of Diana. I'm your host, Harrison Katz. So, continuing with tonight's topic of the Jesuit information gaps. Let's start where we started in Scripture. Or let's start with Scripture. Talk about information gaps. Now, I'm not talking about gap theory. If you want to learn about gap theory in biblical prophecy, I suggest you take a listen to Pastor Eric John Phelps. No, I'm talking specifically about understanding, the information that is contained in the Bible. Again, we have to remember historically that there was a point in time that men and women did not have the scriptures in a language they could read. The layman. During the Pope's Dark Ages, any book of the Bible that was found to be written in any language other than Latin and was, of course, prescribed by the Latin Church to be printed was to be seized and to be burned, and the people who possessed it to be killed. You see, so even during the Dark Ages, you had the Catholic people at that time, the people in Europe, the vast majority of them, who knew who Jesus Christ was. Did they really know Jesus Christ? Because they didn't have the Word of God. All they had was what the stained glass windows in the cathedrals showed them. They had all the iconography. They had all the idols. And of course, they had the Latin Mass and whatever the priests told them. But again, even at that time, there was a large information gap between what the people, what the parishioners, what the average Catholic or Christian in the Dark Ages believed the Bible taught, and what the actual information, what the Bible actually taught. And guess who used this information gap, this ignorance, to their advantage? Well, of course, the papists. And they still do. It's the same tactic. And you know how that broke? Was the Reformation. With the Reformation and the Bible getting into the hands of the common man, specifically the Reformation Bible, which is based on the Textus Receptus, the received text. Now again, I could go off onto a tangent here to say that people who attack myself and men who believe that that the only true Word of God is not specifically the King James Bible, but books that are Reformation Bibles translated indirectly from the directly inspired text, that being the Textus Receptus for the Greek New Testament. Now, those of you who say that King James, that it doesn't matter what version you read, you have to understand. You yourself have a very large information gap in your own understanding of biblical history. Not history as per se as taught within the Bible, but history of biblical texts and their survival and their movement across the centuries to different locations. So you yourself have a very large information gap because even though the information is there for you to look at, you don't want to go there. You don't want to look at that information. What about academics, education, science, history? Oh man, you talk about some information gaps. Let's start with history. I mean, anybody who listens to this show knows that I am quite the amateur historian and researcher. Oh, I'd say above average. And when I tell you that there are massive gaps in the history that you were taught in public schools and in your colleges and universities that you pay for, huge information gaps brought to you by none other than the Jesuit order. Now, I mean, you want to talk about history. Let's just talk about the history of the Reformation per se. Your children getting taught about the Reformation in school? I remember when I was in high school. This was when I was living in Valdosta, Georgia. I may have been 15 at the time. I believe I was a freshman. No, sophomore. Sophomore in high school. And I had a history teacher in Georgia. Forget his name, remember his face, but I remember, and again, I didn't make it to many days of class. I think that year alone I think I skipped over 60 to 80 days. But I remember the one of the few times that I made it to that history class. That teacher wrote on the board two things I remember. First, he wrote excommunication, and then the next thing he wrote reformation. And he told us that this word here, reformation, is the most important point in history in the last 2,000 years. Now, that was not something that he read out of his teacher's guide or summary for the day, his plan, his schedule. And it was never brought up after that, or if it was, again, I probably missed that day. But it was brought up that one brief time, and I never forgot it. But brings me back around to my point. How many of your children can even spell reformation? So you got huge gaps, and that's just history of the Reformation. But I say just history of the Reformation, but that is one of the most key points in understanding history and what the overall arc of the past 600 years has been. It has been Reformation versus Counter-Reformation. If you don't understand that dialectic in reality, then you really don't understand history. So again, you have a Jesuit gap, Jesuit information gap, and it's really a gap of omission because the Jesuits don't want your children learning about the Reformation, because that is where true history stems from, because it's centered around the Word of God, around the Bible, and you can't have that. You can't have that kind of history being taught to your young children. We've got to make them good consumers and taxpayers and U.S. citizens and vessels and such. Well, let's go to, the children, let's go to education. How many parents out there how many times have you had your child come home from school and hand you some homework, and you look at it and you say, I don't even know what this is. Let's say Common Core math, for one. They are teaching your children, these younger generations, as the years go on, they are teaching them with these curriculums, these Jesuit-inspired curriculums that are filled with holes. Man, I'm talking about like a musky Swiss cheese, just filled with holes, filled with gaps, no real understanding. Teaching them all just to pass a test. And as long as they can pass a test, then they're supposed to be educated. Huge information gaps in academics, education. But let's continue on. Because the train doesn't stop there. Let's talk about secret societies for a second. You secret society boys, I'll tell you what, you really get me. Because your whole game, your whole racket is information control. Whether you know it or not, whether you are at the top of the pyramid or whether you're just one of the lower planks. Information control, information gaps is what drives those organizations. Because if the whole truth was made known to every single initiate as soon as they walked in the door, let me tell you something. There would be no Blue Lodge Freemasonry. All you Blue Lodge Freemasons, I have no sympathy for you. I don't, because you are willfully ignorant of your Masonic brethren. You think you can sit there in your Blue Lodge and think just because, oh well, I don't have anything to do with the higher, the higher degrees, so therefore I'm not a part of it, and therefore I can say, oh, well, this lodge that I'm in is a Christian lodge. Right? You fools, you blasphemers. I mean, when I'm talking about information gaps, even in these secret societies like the Masons, there's huge information gaps from what the men of the lower degrees are taught as truth from the men of the higher degrees. So if you're just a third degree Master Mason in the Blue Lodge and you haven't gone up through the York or the Scottish Rite, then you don't understand the deeper mysteries, the higher mysteries of Freemasonry. And spoiler alert, but all they are is pretty much a reintroduction of the Roman Catholic Apocrypha, veiled in allegory and ridiculous Masonic history. That's all it is. Just bringing back ideas from the Roman Catholic Apocrypha, books like the Book of Enoch or the Book of Second Esdras, and so on and so forth. Teaching that the lodge actually, or that masonry and the two pillars actually go back to Enoch. Teaching that Eve cohabited with a agent of Lucifer, some demon, and that they produced, and that it was through this demonic cohabitation with Eve that Cain was produced. And then so you have the first division of statecraft and priestcraft with Cain and Abel. I mean, the blasphemy that is, the biblical blasphemy that is taught in these higher Masonic degrees is enough to just make me sick. And I had a Mason one time. I used to be friends with this guy named Jeremy. A little older than me. I think he was 37, 38 at the time. Just a couple years ago. Had me and my ex-fiance over for Thanksgiving dinner. And because of a previous conversation that we had several weeks before about Masonry, and how I, not knowing he was a Mason, expressed to him how I thought that the mysteries of Masonry were actually satanic. And so he chooses Thanksgiving evening to bring this topic back up. The kids are around. He's had a couple drinks in him. And we get to talking about this subject again. And he tries to convince me that he's a part of a Christian Masonic lodge. And that there's no way that anybody who's not a Christian could ever join, because they would get blackballed during the vetting process. Literally get voted out with a black ball. He even went as far to bring out his copy of the Florida Masonic, what's it called? It's a manual. It's like not a cipher, but it basically gives in code the different rites of the lodge, how you enter, who's supposed to say what, the different ceremonies, opening and closing. But it's all done in a coded way, a monitor. He brought me the Masonic Florida Monitor, and which, he's not supposed to show to other people. Showed me his ring, all these things, and got into this huge debate about whether whether Freemasonry was Christian. And I'm here to tell you, if you know anyone who is involved in Masonry, it is another perfect example of the Jesuit information gap, because not only is there all these huge information gaps that exist between the lower levels of Masonry and the higher levels of Masonry, but just to put the cherry on top, it was the Society of Janus, aka the Jesuits, who wrote all of the Masonic degrees. All of them. All of them. From the very inception of Freemasonry on the continent, right, with the first 4 degrees, which were known as St. John's Masonry, and then coming down to the late 1700s in the College of Claremont, where they finally finished up their what were known as the Rites of Perfection, which essentially got transferred over into the Scottish Rite, the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite. It's all nonsense. It's all brought to you by the Society of Janus, aka the Jesuits. And it is another great example of a Jesuit information gap. Now let's talk politics. Let's talk voting. You want to talk about an information gap? People still think that they're these clowns that they see on the television are actual statesmen. These politicians are nothing but actors. And until you can get that into your head, there will continue to be a very large information gap between you and reality. Join me on the other side, the Hounds of Diana.
You're listening to 24/7 World Radio, home of Eric John Phelps and Vatican Assassins.
This is Eric John Phelps. Please listen to my broadcast, The Eric John Phelps Show, as I preach the true gospel of the risen Lord Jesus Christ, defend the Protestant Reformation that birthed Western civilization, and expose the counter-Reformation of the Jesuit order seeking to make the Pope of Rome the universal monarch of the world. Join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on 247worldradio.com.
This is Brother Nicholas. Join me every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the German Bible Truth Hour, and at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the Dutch Bible Truth Hour on 24/7 World Radio. This is Bruder Nicholas. Ich lade euch herzlich ein, mich anzuhören, jeder Dienstag um 2 Uhr nachmittags, amerikanische Zeit, für die deutsche Bibelwahrheitsstunde und 3 Uhr amerikanische Standardzeit für die niederländische Bibelwahrheitsstunde am World Radio 24/7. Dit is broeder Nico. U bent hartelijk uitgenodigd om elke dinsdag om 2 uur Amerikaanse standaardtijd het Duitse Bijbelwaarheidsuur te volgen en 3 uur Amerikaanse standaardtijd het Nederlandse Bijbelwaarheidsuur te volgen op 24/7 World Radio.
You're listening to 24/7 World Radio.
Welcome back to the Hounds of Diana. I'm your host, Harrison Katz. So continuing with these last couple of examples here about these Jesuit information gaps. One of the biggest gaps in information and people's understanding, specifically in the U.S., is their understanding of war and finance, which nowadays is one and the same. Everybody wants to think that the Constitution is still reigns supreme in their life. Everybody wants to think that they still have the full protection of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. People really, really have a total, utter lack of understanding when it comes to their legal status and their economic status. There's the gap. It's like it's reminiscent of what I read in Luke, what is it, chapter 16, where Christ is telling us not the parable but the story of Lazarus and the rich man, and this giant chasm that was beneath, that was in that Lazarus was shown, this giant chasm between Abraham's bosom and the lower parts of Sheol. That is the type of chasm that I'm talking about, because the average person has not been paying attention since 1933. And every generation, they have incrementally been feeding us propaganda, nationalism, propaganda, and to where now, 80 some odd years later, Americans have no idea of the complete and utter change that happened in this country in the 30s. And it's sad when you talk about an information gap, because as I've said in past shows, when dealing with certain stuff, and I know some of that information is hard to deal with, specifically when I'm talking about those construction differential subsidies, aka your birth certificate. Many of you may not want to believe that, but it's true. It's absolutely true. And to prove to you the information gap, does it make you feel good to know that Barry Manilow knows more about this subject than the average U.S. citizen? Yeah, that's right, Barry Manilow. He has a song. It goes, "We're all just ships in the night. We smile because we think it's all right. We're just here, but we're still out of sight. Just like those ships that pass in the night." That's Barry Manilow from the 70s. And you're telling me that you're going to let Barry Manilow know more about what's really going on, what's really financing this economy, what's really financing the U.S.'s wars all over the world, really being carried out as crusades for the Pope? And you're going to tell me Barry Manilow has more to say about that than you? Talk about an information gap. And now we get on to the example that is actually not probably, I know it is, the area that is least understood by any of us, and that's technology. Now, there's so many areas that's where the information gap is there when dealing with technology. Let's just go through some of them. 5G. 5G. Many of you think you know what's going on with 5G. Many of you actually have no idea what's going on with 5G because your conclusions are not really based upon anything It's really a lot of assumption and conjecture. But if you go and listen or actually watch a live show that I did, I pretty much prove pretty conclusively that what they're in fact doing with all these 5G networks is creating a nationwide passive radar system using every single one of our smartphones, our laptops, smart TVs, refrigerators, everything to ping all these frequencies off one another and off all these solid objects to create one giant 3D model, which, if I were to tell you how accurate and realistic the rendering is, you wouldn't believe me. But I tell you, it's there. So there's a massive gap in understanding what 5G communications is really all about. Cloning technology, reproductive cloning. I mean, this is one to where people who, let me put it to you like this. The information gap is so large that I guarantee you every single person who is listening to the show has seen a clone, whether they know it or not. You've seen one on TV. You've seen more than one on TV. Now, I know, again, I did another live show about this, proving to you conclusively that the technology exists to do this very same thing, to reproductively clone a man, woman, or child. Matter of fact, you can go to China and get your dog reproductively cloned for like 50 G's. The only reason they give for saying that they're not doing it is because of their so-called ethical principles, which, if you know anything about science, you understand that those are non-existent. So what's really going on? Well, you want to know what's going on? I've told you what's going on. Cloning is a real technology. It's real. It's being implemented. Go look at the current president of the United States. Look at a side-by-side picture of him yesterday and 6-7 years ago. Another example. The the prime minister or whatever position of Germany, Angela Merkel. Go take a look at an up-close, full-frontal picture of her face from yesterday, and then go back, I don't know, 7-10 years. Go take a look at a picture of the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin. Take a look at his picture yesterday, and then go take a look at his picture 7 to 10 years ago. All three of those examples, Biden, Putin, Merkel, the quote-unquote person that you see today in front of you on the news is not the same person, quote-unquote, they were 7 to 10 years ago. And I just give that number as a general timeline. But it's absolutely true. And if you don't understand these things, then again, there's a very large information gap that you have. And in fact, there's a giant blind spot that you have in your assessment of whatever you think is going on in the world. Nanomachines. Nanotechnology. I've discussed this last show, talking about nanotherapy and the Pfizer and Moderna, how they're actually, it's nanomedicine. You can just read it right there in their own, in the science. It's right there in the science. But yet it's right there in the black and white. It's right there in the fine print. But why wasn't anybody else talking about this until a couple weeks ago? Hey, I'm happy that who is it? Dr. Jane Ruby? that she's discussing this stuff now, because it's about time someone with an actual medical background starts discussing some of these things. It can't just be little old Harrison over here, little old Harry Katz. I mean, I can point you in the right direction. I can lead your horse to water, but I can't make him drink. Quantum computing. Oh, man. This goes back to science and just the huge information gaps and falsehoods that are taught in science. You see, what they teach in quantum physics is this idea, this theory, this wet dream called quantum superposition. Doesn't exist, will never exist. Not in the way that they think or the model that they have. So the idea of quantum computing revolves around their idea of perfecting this quantum superpositioning. So if quantum superposition is not a possibility, then you have to understand that neither is quantum computing. If you want to know what the true future of computers are, you need to look into neuromorphic, like not neuro, but neuro, N-U-E-R-O, neuro, like neuroscience, dealing with the brain, neuromorphic computing. Let's go more technology. How about the UFO phenomenon and these so-called extraterrestrials who are abducting people on these crafts? What's really going on? You see, with these huge Jesuit information gaps, people will believe this type of nonsense, that these are actual extraterrestrials from another planet visiting this planet. Because there is that information gap. The truth does not dwell there. So therefore, you get nothing but false conclusions. And I've got some other things written down. I mean, the moon, the supposed moon landing. I mean, you want to talk about information gaps. Let's just talk about space rockets. You're telling me that space rockets in the 60s and 70s was capable of doing what space rocketry and computers and all the tons of advancements in science some 50 some odd years later, that they cannot reproduce what was done in the late 60s and 70s with NASA and these space rockets and moon landings? You're telling me space rockets is the only technology that is actually regressed? Seriously? When all of NASA's control room at quote-unquote Houston at the time is now, there's more computing power in my smartphone here in front of me, and you're telling me that they can't reproduce that telemetry data and tell us how they got to the moon and reproduce and then actually carry it out again? Something's missing. Large information gaps called the truth that never went to the moon, and that you cannot go to the moon even today. So, based on all these information gaps and my over the last year of researching, let's go over some predictions for the future, because what is all this information really good for if we cannot point to certain things and say, hey, I warned you, look out for this. Let's start with politics. Again, I predicted this in the past. Biden's funeral will be pre-2024, and it will probably be presided over by a Jesuit priest. Harris will take over until Trump. And that's right, Trump will be, quote, reelected in 2024, probably joined by Ron DeSantis, who collectively I like to refer to as Ronald Trump. That's Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump. Ronald Trump, who will not run/win as Republicans, but under the banner of a new, soon-to-be-announced third political party that I think will be dubbed the, quote, American Party, or the Natives, after, of course, the Know-Nothings from the 1850s. The end game of all this is the rise of new right fascism to match the already existing new left Marxists. both being manipulated and orchestrated by Rome and her dirty dog Jesuits. All set to climax in a second U.S. Civil War. Predictions in health. The true side effects of all this nanomedicine being injected into men, women, and children's bloodstreams will soon start to manifest years after the fact. You can see this already start to manifest socially, with women being discouraged to have kids, but soon it will be shown that men and women are statistically having less kids worldwide. But the end game behind all this, quote, experimental, quote, emergency injections is pure and simple population control. Prediction: you can expect the worldwide birth rates to plummet. And last, with technology, expect to see more robotics and automation become commonplace. I predict a company like McDonald's will be the first international company to push this agenda forward, replacing everyone from the drive-through attendant to the fry cook. Expect the popularity of video games to grow even more than it already has in the past decade. Once these corporations release this next-gen virtual reality with its hyper-realism and completely immersive experience, it will catapult this VR into everyday life, replacing this creation, this God-given, beautiful creation, with an artificial one, with its own rules and its own idol. Time we woke up, people. Time we get informed.
From Feature Story News,